We sat down with the senior vice president of the platform where all the DJs get their music to build a solution that can track the impact of a single download. And we did all of that within just 30 minutes. Here's how it went. All right. A warm welcome, everyone. We are actually here for our very first time at ADE. We also have no big background in the music industry yet, but that's going to change. So who actually already knows what Beatport is as a company? Okay, so around half of the people here in the room. We actually have our background in the software industry. So for the last years, we've been building plenty of different software solutions across industries, and some of them being in the music industry. And throughout the years, we understood that we saw that there's so much more potential in the music industry. So we decided to double down on creating software solutions together with partners in the music industry. One of them in the past years, for example, being GEMA as the German collecting society. And on this journey, content production has always been something that we are interested in. So we've been producing different podcast formats over the past years. And here at ADE, we're launching a new format that we call Bi30. And here with me is Alex as our honorary guest on this first ever live episode of Bi30 as the music industry edition. So in this beautiful space here yesterday and throughout the day today and also tomorrow, we've been recording episodes with people in the industry. One of them here in the audience was Herbert yesterday. He was also on this format. And as I said, today it's Alex with us from Beatport. And Alex has a vast background in the music industry, that's fair to say. So Alex, right now you're in the role of Senior Vice President for Industry Partnerships, but even before this role, there's been many different hats that you've been wearing in the industry, and we're gonna get into that in a minute. For now, I'm gonna briefly explain the whole concept of Bi30 because it's unlike a traditional podcast. For us, it was important to think about how we can make podcasting more actionable. So since we have our background in building software products, we thought, why don't we try to push podcasting to the limit in the sense that we make it half a boardroom and half a hackathon. So we're going to start this whole conversation with Alex with a particular challenge that he gonna be explaining in a minute, and then we dive deeper into that challenge. And once we actually transition into the solution ideation to that challenge, we're gonna start a timer. So the time is running, and after 30 minutes, Hazam, as our software engineer, he will make the way over to us. And in this case, we're also gonna not present it to Alex, but also to you in the audience. And we're gonna see what we managed to come up with within 30 minutes. That's it to the concept. And to directly jump in, I've been already sharing a bit on your background. So Alex, as SVP for industry partnerships at Beatport, you're responsible for the ecosystem and growing the ecosystem. And you've been in this industry for almost 30 years. What have you been actually up to before this role as SVP for partnerships at Beatport?
Yeah, there isn't enough time to go through the whole list. Just check my LinkedIn, but essentially mostly record company side. But I've also spent an awful lot of time at the intersection between tech and music, typically in and around digital distribution. That's often where I cut my teeth, because it was really at the point when the industry really kind of went online. So we're talking about sort of late 90s into the early 2000s. And so that's where I've stayed, because it's been the growth piece. It's been probably the most interesting thing as far as I'm concerned. But it kind of presents its whole set of its own unique challenges, which is one of which we'll get into during this.
So what is actually that particular challenge that we're going to be tackling today?
Yeah, so I think in the industry, most people are quite familiar with the idea of thinking about data and analytics and measurement, and that informs decision making. One of the rather unique things about dance music is that it's still a little bit kind of behind where I think probably most people think it is. And what I mean by that is that Beatport, the company that I represent, still to this day, the most sort of profitable part and the bit that we're known best for is selling downloads. This is not something normally covered on any other panel anywhere. Everybody's been talking about streaming for as long as I can remember, or they're talking about Web3 and cryptocurrencies and the rest of it. And downloads, if you think about what's happening, it's literally coming offline. So when that happens, you start to lose track of it. And that was the thing that we were talking about, which is what happens to that download when it leaves the Beatport store, from a point of where does it go, and how can you measure its impact and success on all of the other things that we then like to try and measure. So things like social interactions or streaming data or the positive impact on algorithms, whatever it might be. And a lot of the times what you're trying to then do is get to the understanding of who is my audience, where's my audience, and how is it growing. But it's really hard to do that with an offline file that you've kind of lost track of.
So in a nutshell, the challenge that we're tackling today is measuring the value of such a download, as it's not just a stream for me as a listener on Spotify, but it's a DJ, and the DJ plays in front of an audience, so there's a bigger impact to it. And that's something that we're gonna be tackling today to try to come up with a solution around that impact of such a download. Why is it actually worth solving, in your opinion?
One of the observations that I made when I got to the company was that if you think about Beatport, it's 21 years old, and most people think about DSPs in the sort of list of, I don't know, pick one at the top: YouTube, Spotify, Apple, right? And you sort of work your way down, and there's all these kind of like DSPs around the world. Beatport, being quite old, I think record companies that maybe don't specialize in dance music don't really understand the value, but we rely on them because that's often where catalogs get acquired by into, and we sometimes lose a little bit of the relationship. So the job is to try and explain why we're important and keep them engaged. And that's going to be very tricky when you think about the customer base that is Beatport, because we aren't a mass consumer DSP. We don't hit the laggard consumer in any particular meaningful way. Our customers are DJs. These are, and I'm going to borrow a term that you're all familiar with, but a colleague of mine said, and when she said it, I was like, that's genius. So if you think about Beatport perhaps in this way, as we're just a huge influencer platform, right? Now all the marketing teams are getting excited, right? Because they're used to thinking about influencers and paying them and trying to impact the algorithm wherever that may be. And so, I think we lose a little bit of our space because in a sort of revenue list, we don't go very high because we're just selling these downloads and we have a streaming platform, but we're only selling to a tiny cohort of the music buying public. And so it was a way of, I did some research. This is the right time to bring it up.
I mean, yeah, it's important for us to understand when we start thinking about how we actually solve this challenge. What have you been trying so far in that context? So maybe you want to dive into that part. How have you been solving or trying to solve it with your capabilities? And there's something that you mentioned around research that you've been doing. So maybe you want to quickly touch on this.
Yeah, so once I'd sort of identified that problem, I thought, well, I wonder how I can solve it in a way that makes sense. And if you think about the companies I'm talking about, they want to make money. I know, shocker. So I thought, how best to speak their language? And so I set out on a mission to try and put a value on how much download was actually worth from the Beatport store. Now, of course, on the surface, you're thinking, well, surely because you sell them for like, $1 plus. Yes, but if you kind of go back to where I was going with this, Beatport doesn't sell to the end consumer. It sells to the person that then influences the end consumer, and that's a network effect. So if I know that music travels in an often analog way, then there's a value that is attached to it. So We did a survey of our DJ customers, and I kind of took that survey information and then applied other data points. I don't think we've got time necessarily to go through all of it, but essentially, if you just appreciate, we asked DJs questions like, where do you play, how often, what's the audience size, how many tracks do you put in a set, how many of those tracks came from the Beatport store, etc., etc. I then applied all of that information to what I could gain access to in terms of listening behavior, broke that down by genre, then looked back at the Beatport store, and we have a niche genre set, or we certainly did when I did this particular bit of research, and then added in some publicly available information from collection societies, because that reflects the revenue that's being generated through live performance. So I just sort of mashed all of that together, and it's very caveat-laden research. But essentially, I got to this nice, beautiful number of every single download from the Beatport store is actually worth $40. And when you say that to certain companies, their brains start to go, oh, that's interesting. And also then when you tell them the reason why it's worth that is because our DJ community plays out collectively, and they get to 8.3 billion sets of ears in a year. And that's the sort of number they're used to thinking about when they're thinking about TikTok and Instagram and whatever. You're sort of into those millions and billions. And it's been amazing, actually, how receptive they've been to listening to that methodology. And they do understand it. They just hadn't thought about it. And so it's been very useful as a device to have that dialogue and open up that conversation. But ultimately, with the research, where I got to was I could only get so far. And it's by the way, it's available on our Beat Portal site, which is our sort of community hub. So it's available publicly there, so you can go and take a look. And there's one sort of paragraph at the end where I describe that I could only ever take this so far. Where I wanted to get to with it was the bit that comes next. So if you just think about it like this, the consumer, the laggard consumer, has heard the track, Shazam the track. What do you do when you Shazam a track? You add it to your library, add it to a playlist, and then you play it. What happens then? Positively impacts the algorithm. What happens then? Further discovery happens, right? That's how that whole mechanism functions. And it all began with that singular download from Beatport. But I can't track it. I actually can't measure it. I can't tell people exactly what that wider network impact is. And that was the problem that I thought I'd bring today. So a nice, easy one.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
To wrap it up, before we transition into the solution ideation, what would you say? What's the potential impact if we could solve that challenge?
I guess I can start by saying that Beatport as a company has, over the years, again, we're very old and we have therefore some legacy tech debt, if anyone's familiar with that phrase, and we've been busy trying to solve that over time. But one of the things we've still not yet done is provided good analytics through to the partners that supply the music, both the artists and the labels, and obviously our distributor partners.
Awesome.
So yeah, without that, it's hard to go. Yeah.
At this point, I'm going to start our timer.
Okay.
And we're going to get into the solution ideation. And for me, at this very beginning, it's important to understand and put ourselves in the shoes of a DJ. So I myself, as a DJ, I download this track, and then I'm going to use it for a set. And this is, as you described, the point where you sort of lose track of what's happening. So let's think through this value chain of, okay, there's this download, and at the point where it's played for the first time, what are the potential steps where we could make such a tracing down the line? So let's quickly think it through. One is obvious. It's after it's downloaded, it's the venues where there's also already some kind of system in some of these venues in place.
Some of this.
Yeah. For collecting societies, for example.
So you've identified the correct first point, which is our platform is both our library access and how playlists are created, as well as these sort of offline files. They often end up in, let's just say, Pioneer DJ, Alpha Theta hardware. And those guys have invested in some metadata analysis tools, and they've also got involved with another company that does the listening piece, because it's one thing to know what goes into the mixer, it's a whole other thing to know what comes out the speaker. So there are, I don't believe that there's necessarily one solution to this. I think it's going to be a collective community thing, by the way. And so that's definitely the first part, right? It's like, did it come out of the speaker?
Okay. And then afterwards, you quickly touched on Shazam, for example.
I think it's just the one that everybody knows, right? So, funny enough, we are partnering with somebody in the audience here to add to our Beatport app. Who could it be? Shout out to Albert here. And so, dance music is somewhat unique in its performance, because there's pitch changes that happen. When you're speeding it up, slowing it down. You're also doing concurrent. I was going to say streams, plays. So it's sometimes hard for Shazam, let's just say, to work out what's being played, right? It just doesn't know, because the way that their business was built was around essentially taking some sort of fingerprint and enabling the analysis to happen at speed when it's played. So that's fine when it's nice and easy, but when DJs are perhaps dropping in samples, or playing 3 decks at a time, or whatever the thing is, right? Or deliberately speeding it up, right? It's hard for a lot of services to understand that. But the company Sequence, who's developed this technology, can do that. And so we're putting that into our app. So our app is what our DJs use to do set building. But they're also club goers, right? They're also people that will just sit and listen to the radio. And so we feel like that's a really good place to also do that. Also, once it's in a mobile phone, there's a possibility of doing geotagging, because that was the other kind of problem. It was like, you could work out like when and what, but like you couldn't necessarily say where, because certainly the I think all of the existing hardware and software that is integrated into our streaming platform, which we also have, or that works with these files, you can't necessarily like work out where on earth it's being played, right? So that was the other sort of problem.
I see. As we're speaking, I'm actually getting information from the team about potential solution ideas, and the first thing on there is actually around that fingerprint ID, around a unique identifier to embed in every Beatport download. For me, it's important to understand where there's the biggest unsolved problem. So would you say that around this fingerprint ID, that's something that is covered, or would it make sense to dive deeper into that aspect?
Yeah, it's not covered. I've looked at it in the past, and there has been companies that have tried to put, you can't hear them audibly, but they're signals within the audio, which is, we're talking about an analog signal. We're not talking about a digital signal. So that bit of technology, I think, has been partly developed somewhere. We don't implement it, and part of the problem there is the supply chain, and you've got to then sort of like go all the way back to, where did we get the music from in the first place? We got it from a disparate set of, and in dance music, the most fragmented section of the music industry, because there's so many entrepreneurs, label owners, and so you've either got to like ask them to do it, right? That I would say is impossible, or we've got to implement it ourselves. Maybe that's slightly more possible. We then have to get approvals to do that, because we'd be fundamentally changing the asset that they've sent us. That in itself may present a problem. So you've got a licensing issue there at that point. But it's a good idea, because theoretically then it can carry with it. And in the early sort of internet days, they looked at doing this with DRM files to basically solve this problem through a particular network. But yeah, nobody's done it yet.
To what extent have you been looking into correlations between downloads and social media and streaming platforms in terms of patterns and spikes? Because I do see that there is potentially something interesting in these correlations, taking a look at downloads and at the same time analyzing on social media platforms and streaming platforms spikes, specifically on social media platforms, as you've been mentioning, also geolocations. There's some data to it that might or might not be accessible in one form or another? To what extent have you been looking into these correlations and analyzing them?
It's a really good point because, you know, when I started talking about this, I was thinking about the performance that's happening, say, in a club. But you're right. Like, really, anything that DJs are doing is then reflected in culture, in community, and that's captured often in social media posts, whether that's people posting from the dance floor or DJs posting that they've played a record. So you're right, aggregating that data together will also help you understand what's actually happening on the dance floor. Have we done much in that area? No, not yet. But again, the sequence implementation within our Beatport app to create a kind of dance music Shazam, if you like. My marketing team will hate me for saying that. I'm sure it's supposed to be called something else. But essentially, that's the idea, right? So, you know, we are conscious of all of this stuff. Yeah.
And something that is less intrusive around playback trace via integrations, so that we have links with Beatport library to the DJ software. Is that something that you've been covering, or?
Yeah, I mean, we know what's played. Okay, so when it's our streaming service, we know everything that's being played, right? Because we see it, we have to report it, we have to pay royalties on it. It is the download piece that's still the mainstay of how DJs, and it's growing, by the way. Our downloads grew 10% last year. It's like, that's crazy, really, when you think about it. Nobody else is growing the download business other than us, pretty much. So it's not going away anytime soon. DJs don't have the confidence in streaming as a concept to play live. Now, theoretically, there are offline lockers and things like that we have. We think that's where it's headed. We do. But when? Who knows? So at the moment, most people are using our streaming platform to discover tracks and dig better because they can put tracks in a set and learn what they like. I mean, one of the things that we're doing that might also help this is next year we'll be allowing people to go and claim their profiles. And so at the moment, profiles are kind of created at the point of ingestion and distribution. So nobody's actually gone on and claimed them. So we established them, but we're not entirely sure whether all of those profiles are exactly legit. And once they can do that, then they can kind of feed more information to it. One of the things that we could also use here is we just launched ticketing on the platform. And the ticketing platform is designed so that you can link it back through to your own profile. So if you're doing that, then there's potential things for like audience, like understanding the audience that could attend the event. So you could then feed that venue data back in. There are companies that have already done that. What's it called? Branson already have this information. So I think there's, again, probably quite a collective thing that we could do here. If APIs are either made available publicly or just, you know, commercial deals are done.
At this point, I'd like to integrate you, Hazam. How have you been currently thinking about the solutions? What have you been focusing on?
So based on what Alex said about his research and trying to aggregate different sources of information to get what he's looking for, I tried to follow the same path and basically aggregate different and other sources that can give us even more extended results. So that's the idea. What do you think?
You've got to start somewhere, and I think that will help you understand the it's what I found. There were certain areas of the research that I could see there were gaps, and I could see that it was deficient, but I had to just make a decision. Okay, I can't do more on that. I don't have the time, resources, intelligence probably. And so I just had to say, that's fine, I'll move on. And actually one of the weakest bits was I used Shazam data. I used AI to help attribute genres to it. And that was probably the weakest part of my research.
So the idea is there is a couple other sources that track, for example, which DJ, for example, the hardware, Pioneer hardware also can track like which track played where, and not where, but if we aggregate it with other scraped data from the web, DJ displaying here at that date, and if we get aggregated from the Pioneer hardware, we can tell more. That's what I meant. So extending the data that we're using. Yeah. You think there is value there?
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Have you been looking into that correlation analysis?
Still early to say. It's just 10 minutes in, so give me more time. But yeah, there's
You've only given him 30. Give him the full 30. Like it's okay.
Okay, keep it in the back of your head. I would love to see something around that in the solution that we come up with. I leave it with you again back to your keywords. Alex, when we think about the solution, to whom would this provide most value? Is it something that we are building for you as an integration in addition to your existing product ecosystem? Would there be value for other people out there? How do you think about the actual types of users and who would benefit most?
It would certainly benefit us. We're going to do parts of this as far as we can take it eventually. For example, we have some unique data that's not available anywhere else purely because it's coming from our platform. So it's things like we know how many people have listened to a non-revenue generating play. So things like a sample play, we actually capture that information. So we can tell, obviously, what was actually downloaded or what was streamed that was paid for, but we can also look at that discovery process and to see, essentially, I guess it's like a sort of success metric. How many people have heard the music that then went on and bought or streamed it to make a payment? So obviously the correlations there could be completely different. You could get a whole lot of people trying it and then not purchasing, and then you've got fewer people trying it and purchasing, and then that's really good, right? You're hitting your mark, do more of that. So that's the sort of stuff that we're going to start surfacing. And the reason why we're doing it, I guess, sort of answers your question, is because there is some frustration with us in the industry that we're so important to the journey of a record, because it's where every record in dance music begins. I know it's a bit of a bold statement, but it is true. It all starts with us, and if they find success on our store, then it starts that very early nucleus of that network effect, because it goes into our charts, more people discover it there, more people download it, more people play it. And once you start doing that, again, we know that this network impact happens outside. So could you build it for us? I'm sure our CTO would love a bit of free engineering time. That'd be great, as much as our CFO would like that. But no, I think there's already a proven business model out there, whether it's Chartmetric or Vibrate or others. So you could spin up a metrics company and make that data available to whoever. For example, we might be a commercial enterprise partner and take that into our own analytics dashboards, put it with our own proprietary data, or maybe we might do a swap and we send you some and you get some back. Because I think the thing is that Beatport in itself is Beatport, right? We are an ecosystem, a lot of things happen, but we're not the whole thing. We are certainly not the laggard consumer consumption platform. It's like, that's not what we do. So I think you'd want to look at all of those things because they're all part of what we're discussing here, which is, what is that kind of complete life cycle of music? Where does it sort of go and flourish and end up? So yeah.
Who else aside from you would be interested in those analytics?
So record labels, publishers, distribution companies, and of course collection societies that are in that mix of making that payment for the performance of the recording and the song composition. I think you could probably also find ways of turning it into sort of fan gamification. If you got that sort of ambassador street team model, this is something that companies have iterated over time. And if there's then rewards from the artist into that, if you can prove and demonstrate that you're gaining extra exposure for records, I think that's an interesting sort of tool that the record companies in particular would probably be quite interested in. Other companies look at doing this sort of stuff. I met one the other day. They're trying to solve the problem of when you're on Instagram and you're clicking through into the bio, because that's the only place you can have the link, and then you end up on a link tree, and then you end up on Spotify. It's like click, 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 right? It's tough and hard to kind of achieve that sometimes. And then it's just in Spotify and you've kind of lost track of it all. But what they were doing was saying, well, you could actually begin from a different place. Maybe you get people first time from Instagram onto this platform, but then you've got this kind of dedicated sort of street team fan base. You don't need everybody in the world to be on this platform. You just need the core fans. So you can actually build that sense of community. It's kind of what we're doing with Beatport. I think we'll start to see a little bit more of that happen. And I think people like it. I think people, especially in dance music, like to feel that they're ahead of the curve, that they've got the inside track, that they know what's going on before other people do. And that's where white label culture came from. Right? DJs didn't want people to know what they were playing, so they'd rip the label off the top, right? And then you couldn't see white label, right? So, but this is that culture, and that I think you can still play on and lean into in a positive way.
Yeah, funny enough, we also use this term in a software context. White label solutions that are being provided so that you can actually brand it with your own company name.
Absolutely.
So actually for me, that was a fun fact that I didn't know about, that this was actually the origin of a white label. Yes, cool to know. We have about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
Let's focus on the product. You mentioned that there's a potential standalone solution that we could create around it, similar to chart metrics.
Sure, why not?
So this is where you see.
Yeah, if you think about what they're doing, and shout out to Chaz Jenkins, who's an absolute hero in this space. You know, they do this thing where they take a whole load of different data sets and then they combine it together and they kind of create their own measurement, I suppose, and they give it a kind of a ranking and a value, and then you can compare closer like to like and basically see how you're doing. There's much more to it, of course, but you know, they understand that there's a lot of confusion around what these metrics mean. You know, some of the numbers are huge, some of them are small. It's kind of what I was saying earlier. What do they actually mean? What is the end impact of any of it? Because you know, the job of the industry is to work with artists and make their music travel as far as it possibly can, hopefully so that the artist can have an actual career from music as opposed to, you know, a day job and then music. Too hard, right? It limits and stifles creativity. So that's what the industry's role's doing. That's what they're trying to achieve. And so if you can understand what the audience and the audience reaction to the music is, then you can inform marketing campaigns. Otherwise, you're just kind of blindly spending money. Again, it's where I began. It's where the industry's got to. It's looking for measurement. And again, in an analog world, that's quite hard. So that's the bit that's still missing. But you made a really good point about the social media, the fact that there are these digital components. If you then couple it together with whatever you can capture on the analog side, you get pretty close. You get probably closer than is almost needed in some ways. You know, if you think about the collection societies, they're not precise yet. They use these analogy models where they sort of just go, well, it's roughly speaking this, and then they apply that to every bit of money. It's not great, right? It's this sort of like concept of, you know, a pro rata model. There's no real precision, but at some point you got to go and pay somebody, right? So how do you do that?
I see. When we think about, and actually how we at Beatport think about software, is not just about the design and development of such a solution. For us, it's always important to super early on validate commercial viability. Is it just a nice product, or is there also a venture case behind it? Because these are two vastly different things.
Agreed.
A nice product and something that is commercially viable. So I would like to discuss with you how we could approach commercial viability and how we would validate it. If we come up with the solution, how would we ideally get to a point where we could say that's something that we should continue exploring, because we have indicators and proof points that there also is a commercial viability, or not, because a devalidation is also fine and super important. The only thing that we don't want to end up with is having a product that has been in the building process for months, and we've seen it for past collaboration partners, specifically in large corporates. Sometimes they develop solutions for years, and then after 2 years, they just stand there and they're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Actually, no one is really picking it up, and that's something where we want to be responsible in terms of how we actually make these investment decisions into technology so that it doesn't end up as something that is not really providing value and becomes something that you don't want to, that you couldn't live without in your life. That's the point we want to get to versus, well, it's just nice to have, but I wouldn't be really, I wouldn't be really keen on putting down money for that solution. So how would you approach validating commercial viability? I mean, you are a partner that we could actually integrate there in that process.
Yeah, I think if you sort of go back to justify this case and put it in some sort of investor deck, what I would do is I would start with how much money is being invested into producing music, marketing music, and engaging audience. And that number's pretty big, right?
Do you have concrete numbers?
There are some available, right? I mean, you could look at trade value of the industry, for example, if that's like the sort of the end piece. But ultimately, once you know what that number is, you can say, well, you've got all these people here spending all this money, billions, right, every year on doing this thing. They don't necessarily know that what they're doing is right until they get to the end point. I mean, it was one of the sort of hardest parts about the industry in the physical days, because you literally had to wait for your the physical shops to send reports back, paper decks, to a distributor who would then, send that on to the record company. But until that time, you didn't really know how well your record was doing. Sure, you had some radio play and some other things like that. These days, it's really heightened because you've got so many measurement points along the way. But it's changed marketing. It's changed how people do their campaigns. Major record companies in particular, and it's not to point the finger, but what they would do is they would just take the same almost like cookie cutter approach to marketing records, and they just do it every time. Have 1 in 10 that would get close at working. It's probably closer to 1 in 1,000. And so there was an awful lot of wasted money that went along the way. And of course, when physical disappeared, you lost a lot of the immediate value in the release cycle. It would take a fan 18 months to spend the same amount of money on a particular record that used to take them a week. So that changed a lot about how record companies thought about their marketing budgets, and they started to reduce them back down. And they couldn't invest all that money because it took a lot longer for it to come back. And also, they didn't really know what was happening. So from a commercial point of view, there's companies spending a lot of money doing a thing. They don't understand always what's happening when they do the thing. But when they do, they can make changes and tweaks and improve that initial spending. That has huge commercial value to all of them. And I'm talking about distribution companies that have marketing teams and all the record companies in particular. I think publishers would also be interested in looking at this from a sort of songwriting performance point of view. If they're developing songwriters, they've got to kind of, as a publisher's job, it's like get that song used by a particular performing artist, right, and recording artist. So they'd probably want to monitor that a bit better than they can right now. So I think you've got a lot of enterprise partners to your data solution. And if you're aggregating it down into a data lake and you can pass it out to all the different partners, hugely important.
So as the initial target customer, would you see record labels?
Record labels, distribution companies, I would probably start there. It's the thing that I know best, though. That's the only thing I'd say. But yeah, publishers as well. I think you'd knock on the door of. And actually, I think if I think back to a story that my friend at Believe told me about Spotify's discovery mode, right? Interesting kind of concept. They were sort of boosting streams in their non-interactive plays on the platform in exchange for a little bit of a give, 30% give on the royalty rate that was coming back. Quite a risk in some ways. What Believe did is they got in there really early and they worked with Spotify to understand what they were attempting to do with this based on the Spotify platform. And they built their own internal algorithm so that when they placed records into discovery mode, they got a much better return on their money. So I think what you might find is if you get in early enough, you can find quite a few good partners that have got good tech teams already that would then work with you to actually fine-tune it so that the product market fit, which is where you're kind of going, is correct for them. That's what I do.
We have around 3 minutes left.
Okay.
This is potentially the last time for you, Hazem, to get any additional information. Is that something that you would want to know from Alex?
I would say no, not enough to implement something else now. But I would actually maybe give you the space of these 3 minutes or maybe 1 minute or two. The host will decide.
Freestyle rap.
Basically, to kind of describe the perfect solution, let's say. Not what we're building today, but the perfect solution, so we know basically the next steps that we can work on to make it impactful. Or even is there a perfect solution?
I guess like from a Beatport point of view, start there. So our intention is to create essentially a dashboard for our labels and artists so that they can log in and they can see what's going on with their record. Now, at the moment, all we're able to show them is who's going on and listening, whether it's a monetized stream or download, but then also that piece as well in as real time as we can possibly get it. That's really where we can get people to. We can also surface for the first time, amazingly, how many people are following you, like both as an artist and a record label, because we have both, right? We're fairly unusual. We sort of profile record labels as much as we profile artists. Most DSPs don't do that, and that's because labels and dance music are really important. Okay, so we're surfacing some of this data for the very first time, and then we'll add in obviously the typical kind of like whether it's a heat map or whether it's a growth chart, comparisons over time. I'd like to see us put in that kind of shuffle dates back to the sort of day one for both, no matter when they were actually released, and to see how the sort of adoption curve takes hold. But we can only ever get it from the data that's within our platform, and we just kind of lose track after that. And I think that there is an intention, I don't know whether it will actually be a reality, is to take the methodology that I worked on from my research and apply it in a kind of way that, I don't know if you guys have ever bothered to ask Google how much is a Spotify stream, and there's a whole bunch of websites that sort of guess, and they're using this sort of like aggregated number, because if anyone knows anything about royalties and the way that works, it changes every single day depending on like how much money's in the subscription pot, how much advertising revenue they got, and then which country it was streamed in and which payment plan it was coming from, and all the rest of it. Right? So it's never a one number. It changes all the time. So anyway, so yeah, we're trying to just surface as much data as we possibly can, but we are going to lose track of it at some point.
So I would say in general, the more or different sources of data you're using, the better result you'll get.
Yep, agreed.
We have 1 minute on the clock. Can you do one last update around the name? Kate come up with the name Ripple.
Ripple
as a ripple effect.
I see.
It's pretty good. Wasn't that the name of a cryptocurrency?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. In terms of vaporware, I think that's for okay. Yeah, Ripple.
If you have another
Sure.
suggestion,
No,
you can
I don't.
say, I like Ripple. There's a cryptocurrency out there, that's true. At the same time, I do believe that it describes perfectly what a DJ actually does here. It creates this ripple effect as we initially started describing it. So it's time to wrap up the work on your end, Hazam and Kate, and the timer is gonna...
Actually, Kate, Ripple with an E at the end, or are you going all modern and just having the L?
Okay.
So Ripple is what we called it. This is a landing page explaining the different features of the app. So what you described, basically the value that is kind of unknown or lost. And what we kind of focusing on is this correlation engine, taking as much data as possible from different sources and aggregating it is to basically show in this hidden or lost value that we talked about. So from downloading track to tracking the playouts to analyzing the impact, and we see this global distribution, or what you call the heat map of the playouts. Complete visibility and the impact, same things. Here we illustrated the different sources. So I tried to go with different things that I could find quickly. So DJ Monitor, Pioneer, the hardware that I talked about, track list, I think we can see the others. also to track where they're playing. Then we can log in. So here's basically an overview of the list of tracks. So this is from the perspective of tracking a couple of tracks here. When we click on one of them, we'll see the details that we talked about. You can see total downloads that this track got, how many playouts that happened, the global reach, estimated of course, and the marketing value in this reach. And what I did actually is each different metric that we're seeing, I tried to tag the source or the aggregated two different sources that made us get this data basically. So see geographic distribution here. We see the top performing tracks. And here, actually, we can see where it was played in the last hours, estimated audience numbers. And here, the correlation engine, basically, and some insights. And basically, this is also correlating spikes in streams. So we can correlate from Shazam, like you said, and see that, okay, after this downloads, the spikes were in the streams went up, so we can correlate both. Yeah. This is what it shows here. And in this section is basically an activity feed.
Very good. And actually, now you've put it out like that, I realized that I should have mentioned like radio monitoring services like Warm. And then there's other like MRT companies, like something.
So more data to
just
implement.
More data. So there's quite a few different data, and actually it seems to be a growing part of the segment. As a Beatport also has a distribution company, and so we get asked by quite a few companies, it seems, at the moment to basically send our music over so that they can do fingerprinting, so that they can track. Okay. And they're all looking to probably monetize that data through the collection societies, so
it sounds like there's like an infinite amount of data.
There's a lot that you can correlate. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, now Hazam, what would you actually focus on next? Because that's obviously a prototype. It's a front end. There's no real data connected yet. Yeah. How would you take it from here?
First of all, I would focus on scraping as much public data as possible. So first of all, to see who is playing where, and then this is the base that we're going to use to aggregate and correlate all the other events. And of course, I think you're going to need partnership in this case to get more data. I don't know if it's available publicly.
I think any of the companies that are aggregating it down, they're doing it to supply through to companies that want to use it, so you'll have to pay for it.
Yeah. So that's the main challenge, basically. The data is there. If we have access, it's good. Otherwise, we have to work on that.
And then, yeah, I mean, you probably then want to, again, similar to what the collection societies do, kind of almost like make a guess, right? So you take as much data as you possibly can, and then just apply that to the sort of the broader scheme of it. But yeah.
So Alex, what are your thoughts?
Oh, it's anyone that can do this sort of stuff is A-OK in my book. I think it's very impressive. And yeah, I guess that's kind of how I imagined a dashboard would look like.
Yeah.
Sure. I love the name, by the way. Great work. And I think, it's quite useful seeing things in that visual way for somebody like me, because, kind of to your question just there, it's like, what's next? It makes it easier to understand. I mean, as soon as you did it, I saw that there were things I hadn't said that could be useful here. So yeah, I mean, look, the reality is you were never going to build a working thing to fix all of the industry's woes in one 30-minute segment. But I think it would definitely be a great jumping off point. So well done.
Alex, thank you so much, for joining this very first live session. We can extend this conversation while we mingle around, and in this whole conversation we've been bringing up DJs over and over again. So we have a DJ right here who's gonna get back to his decks now, and I invite all of you to stay for a little longer. And there's some people in the room I haven't had the chance to talk to yet, so I'd also love to immerse in these conversations all together. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so that's it for this episode. You can check out our prototype through the link in the description. And of course, we'd like to know from you how you would have solved this challenge.